All right, welcome everybody to our fourth Azure Landing Zones external community call. Before we get started, I'll hand over.
Hey, thanks everybody for joining us today. We've got a packed agenda to kick off with, so we're going to start and just dive right in. Feel free to drop any questions that you have into the chat. We are going to have some Q&A at the end of the call, so if anything that we don't address in the chat, we can talk about then. This meeting is recorded. We are going to publish it on the ALZ GitHub repo, so you will be able to access this recording, and we normally publish our slides as well. Except for those that we need to keep internal. So you'll have those as well. We really appreciate you being here. We want to go through and touch all the highlights and all the new work we've been doing across the community. So stay tuned and let us know if you have any questions. Jack, go ahead.
Awesome, thanks, Jeff. And we've got lots of people still flooding in, so apologies if you can hear the Teams dinging noise going off in the background, but I'm sure the team will be letting people in as we go along. I think, yeah, as just to echo Jeff, right, please, as we go along, hit the chat, let us know. We'll absolutely take those questions, and then towards the end, we'll hopefully have some time for some Q&A. So getting into things, we obviously have published for quite some time now a What's New page in our wiki in the ESLZ or the Azure Landing Zones repository. So if you head to that short link, aka.ms/alz/what's new, you'll find the condensed view of all of the updates across all things ALZ, whether that's documentation, policy, implementation updates, all of those things. So instead of going through them in detail, there has been an awful lot since our last call, when we last caught up, and I think we all apologise for that. And going forward, we're going to make these sort of a quarterly occurrence. So watch out for more invites and links at the end to the next one, which we'll be updating soon. But if you do need to go and get yourself up to speed on what's changed since we last spoke, head to the What's New page and keep an eye on that throughout the month, because we update it on a very regular basis. Some key things to call out that I think are worth everybody being aware of. A lot of the team in the last sort of 3 to 6 months have spent some time working with the Azure Enablement Show team. So those of you who know Thomas Maurer, who does a load of those shows around Cloud Adoption Framework and things that are happening in that space. We have published now 3 videos for each of our implementation options. So the Bicep modules and also the Terraform module. And they're sort of level 100, 200, 300 videos. They're all about 15 minutes in length each. So, about 45 minutes of content for each of the implementation options. And supporting that, we've also published some new Azure Architecture Center pages inside of the Azure Architecture Center for each of those modules as well. So highly recommend go and check them out. If you're wondering how you get started with the modules or how you customize certain pieces of them, this is a great place to start. And so, yeah, highly recommend going and check these out. There's lots of great content in here and should answer a lot of the initial questions you may have. Also, live demos and seeing it actually in the real. So if you want to get some hands-on experience, it's a good place to start. And then moving on to some policy updates, right? The lifeblood of ALZ, as I think we all like to refer to it. We have updated lots and lots of policies in the last 6 months since we last spoke. Lots of fixes, lots of enhancements. Some of you in the community as well have actually contributed to that as well. So you have added PRs, and we have reviewed those and merged those into the code base. They're all reviewed by us here as Microsoft FTEs and run through our testing. So thanks for those of you who have contributed, and thanks to those of you who have just been raising issues and saying, hey, this doesn't work, or you've got a missing category in this diagnostic settings policy. All of those things really help us stay on top and keep this solution as up to date as possible for you. So please keep them coming. And I think this was probably the question that came on the first community call we ever ran was, why does policies.json exist? Because it's an absolute mammoth to amend and create a PR for. And we finally got round. Kevin did a load of great work along with some of the rest of the team of splitting that up. So now all of the policy files are individual, and they get automatically compiled via a GitHub action and actually a bicep file under the hood, which is all documented. You can go and see that. So it contributing to ALZ policies is a lot less complicated than it was before. So if you've tried before and gone, I'm not touching that policies.json file, then you go and have a look again, right? It's a lot easier to do now. And we're going to talk through some of our contribution guidance later as well. And I think just a sort of a bit of a looking forward and heading to the future, and we'll definitely be talking more around how do you stay up to date as we go through the agenda later today. But we are in the middle of updating all of the default ALZ policy assignments that we make. So say we make about 25 default policy assignments of various scopes within the management group hierarchy that we deploy as part of Azure landing zones. And we're in the process of enhancing that, right? So we realized that, last time we did this, things have moved on. There's probably new policies we want to put in place, new things that we want to, help our customers get further on that bootstrapping journey of starting their landing zones. So we are working on that right now. There's been a number of PRs going in to a policy refresh branch that you can keep an eye on if you want to in our open source repo. Nothing's hidden. But just know that is a working branch. It's not meant to be deployed. So if you do have any issues, obviously let us know, but it's not something we're supporting. Please carry on using the main branch. And we're planning to complete this by the end of March. And when we do that, we will update the short link there of aka.ms/alz/policies, which is the link to the page with all of the default assignments that we make today. And we'll make sure that that's updated when we do this big refresh of updates. And we're also looking to provide it in a spreadsheet format to the public community as well, because we know a lot of you would like that. As easier to take and then amend and expand upon. So look out for that. And I think a good key sort of highlight from that piece of work is we're finally getting around to adding some default policy assignments for sandbox and decommissioned. So a lot of people have been asking about, hey, what should we do here? What's the recommendations from Microsoft? We've thought about it, and now we're going to actually make those assignments. So as part of that work, you'll see some recommendations around decommissioned and sandbox that will also be exposed via the portal, and obviously they'll roll down into our Bicep and Terraform implementations as we go as well. And finally, right, we have our FAQ pages, and I think this is one of the more unknown parts of our documentation, but highly worth checking out. So the more technical stuff lives inside of the wikis repository, the repositories wiki, and the more conceptual design style questions live inside of the cloud adoption framework, and there's links between both of them at the top. So if you find one, you'll find the other. Just look at the top. But please do go and check that out. There's a lot of the most common questions answered there, like dev test prod. How do you handle that? Things about how do I expand into multiple regions with ALZ? Like all of those common questions that we get. And if you do have any more that you go, hey, I think this is a question that a lot of people ask, raise an issue, let us know, and we'll be happy to contribute that, or feel free to contribute yourself, and we'll happily review the answer and pop that in as well. And moving on from our first question from the community that popped into the discussion on the GitHub comments was around guidance for multi-tenants inside of ALZ. So a bit of a sneak peek into the future. So myself, Jeff, and a few others in the team are working away, and this is sort of screenshots of the documentation that is in draft at the moment that we're planning to finish. It's been on my to-do list for a couple of days to get some minor changes made, but there is guidance coming and probably about 7 new documents for how you should handle multiple tenants inside of Azure landing zones. Now, spoiler alert, it doesn't really change our guidance from what we suggest today. We still very much, on the side of you can do everything you need to do inside of a single tenant. We're not suddenly going to flip our recommendations around and say, hey, you now need 50,000 tenants. That's not the case. But we are providing a lot more guidance in this space around tenants and how it should be handled with Azure landing zones, and how you can use things like Azure Lighthouse to make your lives easier, and all of those sorts of things. So lots of great content coming, listing out some scenarios as well. So we're covering, I think we've listed 5 scenarios, mergers and acquisitions, whether you're an ISV, those sort of things, that reasons that you would typically go or have multiple tenants. And then we provide our standard considerations and recommendations for those things in bullet point format, for things about how you handle automation. We've give you some guidance about how you could automate across multiple tenants using single enterprise application and application registrations and some sort of clever things that you can do with the platform. So yeah, there's lots of great stuff that you can see in that documentation that will be coming shortly. And we plan to get that probably out by the end of February. So just keep your eyes peeled. We'll obviously put it in the What's New when it's live, but this is on its way, and this is from our PR process. So it's very, very close. And I think finally, just to sort of tie over on that multi-tenant conversation, if any of you did manage to make it to the virtual Ignite that happened in 2022, or were lucky enough to make it out to one of the local regional events, there was a session from a spotlight on Norway, which one of our CSAs who works inside of Microsoft Norway, Zach, presented with his customer about how they handle multiple tenants inside of Azure landing zones today, or how they operate a multi-tenant environment with ALZ. It's well worth a watch. Go and check the video there that's linked, because that is a lot of that guidance we've actually taken and distilled and made more generic, so that you can go and take that in a more generic format across ALZ. So yeah, one to definitely look out for. And with that, I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to hand over to Mr. Paul Grimley to do a bit of updating ALZ and Evergreen. So Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Jack. I'm just taking control now. Hopefully that'll come through. Yeah, thanks everyone. So just for those who don't know me, my name's Paul Grimley. I'm an Azure Landing Zone technical program manager. And one of the things I'm focused on is Evergreen, or what used to be known as Evergreen as a code name. So effectively, this is a piece of work I've been focused on, which is about updating Azure Landing Zone. So I've been talking to customers and our field, and we've had issues raised on our GitHub repo as well about the challenges you faced around keeping Azure Landing Zones up to date. So you saw at the beginning, Jack was talking about policy being the lifeblood of Azure Landing Zones. This is basically building on top of that. So I'm going to jump onto the problem statement shortly. This is about moving Azure Landing Zone, the platform, forward. So today is about giving you some updates on the updating Azure Landing Zone piece that I'm focused on. So just to kind of talk through, how did Evergreen come about, and what Evergreen is about, and what updating Azure Landing Zone is about, and the focus we have here. So I want to kind of set the scene for you here. So some of the challenges around maintaining Azure Landing Zone. It has various levels of complexity depending how you've deployed, whether that's through the portal, through Terraform, or through Bicep. You've got different challenges based on which mechanism and reference implementation you've chosen. So customers have to manually subscribe. So we as an Azure Landing Zone team, we're constantly pushing out new features, new changes, bug fixes. We're listening to yourselves as you're contributing to the repo issues and providing us feedback. So we're constantly kind of adding change, as is with the Azure cadence as a platform as a whole. Now, we recognize that through that mechanism, if you subscribe to alerts on our enterprise scale Landing Zone repo, as it used to be known before it was rebranded to Azure Landing Zone, you'd be inundated with notifications, and therefore gives you a challenge to digest and understand and pick out the things that are of interest and areas to focus. So the next one we've got, very, very rich in content is the what's new. We're actively and mandate any changes that we update into Azure Landing Zones goes into the what's new section. So every month you see changes from us. Now, whilst this is great, in an automated world, this doesn't connect, right? So this is a manual customer effort or manual partner effort or individual effort to have to be able to kind of keep a track of what's new. Now, the other challenge here is, as you're moving through as we're moving through the months and we're adding new content, you're effectively having to kind of keep up to date. So if you miss a few months, you're going to kind of miss some great things that have happened. Now, the challenge with that is that's human error. That's open to human error. So that's where we kind of wanted to get away from that. Now, the final thing I wanted to talk about is the cost of change. So when I spoke to one of our customers, they said to me, well, if I'm maintaining Azure, why do I need to change it? You're not giving me a compelling reason to change it. So we've addressed that, and I'll talk to you about that in the next session. But ultimately, we want to emphasize the need to keep up to date and why you should do that. So what have we invested in from what we've heard? So it's all about policy. The feedback we've heard is policy. We have heard some other things as well. They're not necessarily kind of core Azure Learning Zone platform related things, but we've definitely listened to our customers and we capture everything on our backlog to triage as a team. But this is kind of the focus of updating Azure Learning Zone as we have it at the moment. Again, if you want to add any more feedback to the issues, we can take that on board. I'm happy to have a chat with you about what you're hearing, any blockers you have around this. But this is where we're at the moment, and the feedback and signals we got from speaking to the field and our customers. So we need to look at policy tooling. How do we help you? So one of the first things and challenges where we heard policy was a kind of a challenge. How do you know what the latest is? How do you know if you're on this policy? Because Azure Learning Zones has its own library of custom policies and initiatives, and keeping up to date with that, if you're trying to do that manually, can be a task. So we've partnered very closely with Julian, who you're going to hear from shortly, around policy tooling. So we worked with Julian to enhance the AZ GovViz tooling to be able to provide Azure Landing Zone specific policy checker. So effectively what this does, it's a drift detection. It tells you what version you have in your environment versus the version that we are now on in the Azure Landing Zones repo. Now, other things that this is allowing us to do as a team and move faster. You heard again Jack at the beginning when he was doing talking through some policy updates. We talked about policy refreshes. So as part of that, we may deprecate some of our policies as we recognise built-ins will become a replacement for our custom policies that we previously had built. And the advantage to that is obviously then they're built into platform. More customers can take advantage of this without having to kind of manage the cycle of that policy as it is within the policy engine ecosystem. But the drift detection, or this policy checker that Julian's put in for us, will help you, and it will tell you if you're on version 1 and we're on version 3, or if it's deprecated, if we've decided to deprecate that. And we complement that deprecation where we've also got a page in the Azure Landing Zones wiki, which will tell you about the policies we've deprecated and the policy that we've replaced it with if we move to a built-in, and we'll give you some updates on that as well. Now, some key things as part of the kind of updating your policies. So moving from a custom to custom, we recognise the need to provide you with some guidance. So we built some guidance for moving from the custom to built-in and a custom to custom policy as well. So if we continue to maintain a policy outside of the built-in policies or initiatives, we will release a new version, and then you'll need to kind of update that custom policy. And if we do decide to kind of deprecate and move to a built-in, we also have guidance for that. So that's really opened up the speed that we can deprecate and provide the full suite to complement your process and journey to be able to move to built-in. And the aspiration is we do move, as many as we can to built-in. We have to work with engineering to kind of onboard them, and that takes a lot of time. But in the meantime, we'll continue to maintain custom policies in that period. So we also looked at infrastructure as code guidance as well. So we're building out pages on how and why you should use infrastructure as code to manage your Azure Landing Zone environment. So that will be something that will be coming shortly as well. Backward compatibility. So I think this is key. Every time we are thinking of a new feature or we get a request, we need to be thinking about how do we service our existing customers. If we go back, roll back a couple of years, Azure Landing Zones, the portal experience was a click to deploy, a point in time snapshot to get you up and running. It's become so much more since then, and we recognise that we have to take our customers on a journey and take them and provide that guidance, tooling, whatever is needed to help you get up to date with our latest and greatest. And again, policy consolidation as well. We're on a big drive with various product teams to be able to consolidate policies where there is a built-in equivalent or where we find there's a gap, and we want to work with that with that product group team to be able to provide those insights where they can develop policies in-house within that product group team. So great news here. So we've released actually 5 pieces of guidance. So what you're seeing here is 3 cloud adoption framework guidance articles. So we've got an intro guide here as to why, that compelling reason as to why you should update your Azure Landing Zone. And then we've also got two conceptual guides there around migrating from custom to built-in and custom to custom. Now, those two guides individually will then jump into some low-level step-by-step guidance that we have within the Azure Landing Zone repo. So that will give you the conceptual decision-making process. And then if you need that next level of detail of how do you go about recognizing to change a policy and update it, we provide that guidance as well. And we welcome your feedback. And the best way to do that is through the issues in the GitHub repo that we refer to quite regularly on here as well. So this is just to kind of frame and this is my final slide, and then I'll hand over, but this is just to frame the process that documentation goes on. So effectively, you've heard me talk about that drift detection, that policy checker. So that's the detect phase. So obviously, when you detect that there's a change and you need to change, you need to go test that. So once you've tested it, there may be a need that you need to remove that, depending on the scenario. If it's a breaking change, or if you're moving to built-in, you'll have to remove it. Then you'll replace that. When you replace it, you'll then obviously need to test it and then remediate based on that, and then you're back to the beginning, and this will continue around that cycle. So that's a kind of high-level view of the kind of process, and that's me on Evergreen, so or updating Azure Landing Zone, aka known as Evergreen as codename internally. Thanks for listening, everyone, and I'll hand back to is it yourself, Jack, or is it?
We are handing over to our good
you.
friend Julian. So
Yeah,
Julian,
good
over to you,
segue
sir.
to you.
Good afternoon from Germany. My name is Julian Hayward. I'm a cloud solution architect working in the customer success unit in Germany. Does somebody handle the slides? Yeah, I'm pleased to give you an overview on the latest updates for AZ Advertiser as well as for AZ Office. So let's start with AZ Advertiser. So we've started doing some integration of the Azure Landing Zone policy components into AZ Advertiser. I will, in a minute, guide you through the website and give you an overview of what we have here and what is potentially to come up. Next slide, please. And then, as Paul has already mentioned, we will also have an overview of what we've done here with the AZ Office or Azure Governance Visualizer, Evergreen or policy version checker for the Azure Landing Zone policies. And also here, I will give you a brief demo. So I'd say let's start off. Sharing this work? I think so. So yeah, for those who are not aware about AZ Advertiser yet, the tool should help you to keep up with the pace by providing you overview and insights on new releases, changes and updates for Azure Governance capabilities, such as Azure policies, policy definitions, of course, the initiatives, also so-called set definitions, the policy aliases, security and compliance or regulatory compliance controls are also covered. And of course, we have Azure Airbag's role definitions, as well as the resource provider and operations for those. On the start page or the home page of AZ Advertiser, you will also find the summary of the changes, meaning it gives you the insights of what has happened at what day. So if you're interested in policy, you could just click on the link here, and then you see the new policies or changed policies at that date and time. The tool itself is scheduled to run once per day. And yeah, you could also sign up for an RSS feed to get notified about that. About the capabilities themselves, so we have insights on policies. One section is always that we have an insight on the changes, right, that happen to policies, but also to give you an overall insight on the policies that are there. Same goes for the initiatives or policy sets. Then we have an insight on all the policy aliases that are available, right? This can be quite helpful if you're working with custom policy. There's that insight about compliance or security controls. It's a mapping towards which policy is used for which control. Then we have the insights on the ABAC, which again is an enriched insight, like which ABAC role is used, for example, in which policy. And we also have change tracking on that. On the RBAC side, we also need to take a look at the resource provider operations, meaning which operations are in place, which could I use, maybe also for a custom role, and also a reference which operation is used in which role and stuff like this. So let's jump into policy. This site will give us an overall overview of the built-in Azure policies, on the Azure landing zone policies, but also on the community policies. So the first pies that you see here, I'll give you an overview about the categories, for example. No, let's stay with the ALZ ones, with the categories that we have available for the Azure landing zone policies, and it gives you a count on that. Or you just select the Azure landing zones policies themselves. So let's do that. Now we have the filter activated for Azure landing zones. We could also do that here, and it would give us then the filter. And then you can start just searching or digging through the policies. So you see overall, we got 107 productive ALZ policies today. Let's take a look and search for diagnostics policies in this case. Let's grab the first one, and this will then guide you to a more detailed insight on that policy itself. Of course, it starts with the name. We also have embedded some links to the GitHub repository itself, but also a link to the JSON definition that is sitting in the GitHub repository. So this everything will open in a new window, and then you could take a deep dive also from there. Apart from this, we are taking a look into which effects are leveraged in this policy, which RBAC controls are used, which aliases are used in that policy, the resource types that it is addressing in the policy rule. And you see here we also should have a section history, which for the moment, at least for the Azure landing zones policies, is empty. But hereby I want to tell you that we are working on the next feature to also track the changes of the ALZ policies like we do today for the built-in ones. So meaning you could also be notified whenever a new policy from the ALZ is released or whenever an update has occurred. Further, it will then show you in which initiative that policy is used. That's, of course, part of our deploy diagnostics log analytics policy set, which contains more diagnostics. And then last but not least, we can also have a deeper look on the JSON payload and just work with that, copy the definition from here, or as I've just shown you, you could also jump directly to the ALZ repository. Let's take a look also on the initiatives. So the same filtering mechanism, etc., applies for the initiatives. So we could select all the initiatives that are available from ALZ. Again, let's take a look at the diagnostics ones. And from here, same structure, I would say. We don't have a history yet. It will tell you how many policies are leveraged within that custom initiative from ALZ. So this one is, for example, leveraging 17 built-in policies, but 52 ALZ policies. The next column will show you which policies these are with a bit enriched information, and you can again then start filtering around. It will also give you some insights on the roles that are used, and again, we also have the JSON payload for that. Good. Last hint, if you want to subscribe for changes occurring today only for built-in policies, you could also just leverage the RSS feed here, and then you get notified once per day or whenever there is a change. Good. That should conclude the summary for the integration of the ALZ part into AZ Advertiser, and I would now like to proceed with the with an overview on Azure Governance Visualizer. So bear with me. So those of you who have not heard about AZ GovViz or Azure Governance Visualizer yet, what is it? It's a tool that should help you solve the following challenges, like getting a holistic overview on your technical Azure governance implementation by connecting the dots. So it should really help you to give you that holistic overview, what you actually have in your tenant. How does this all work? The tool itself is a PowerShell script, which is going to pull the Azure Resource Manager as well as the Graph APIs, as well as the storage APIs, in order to collect any governance-related information. It's going to leverage the parallelization feature that comes with PowerShell Core. And the technical requirements as well as the permissions that are required to do this are read-only. So I would say kind of minimum requirements to do that. We will have the following outputs that are going to be generated. So we'll give you a hierarchy map, meaning it gives you the overview of how your management groups are structured, where you have which kind of policy assignment, RBACs, or even definitions scoped. And it will then, of course, also show you where you have the subscriptions linked. That's the so-called hierarchy map. Second part would be the tenant summary. In the tenant summary, all the different capabilities come together. So we are taking, and here we are focusing, of course, on policy. We're taking a look at policy assignments, definitions, may it be custom or built-in. Further, we take a look at RBAC and many other topics. I could talk a bit longer here, but we don't have the time. So next one, what it gives you is the definition insight. So that's really a kind of archive of your inventory of all the policy and RBAC definitions that are sitting in your tenant, may it be built-in or custom. And this is just to, I don't know, rework on policies, get deeper insights, analyze the code, copy it away. And of course, it also has some enriched information like give me only the ones that have assignments and at what scope not, etc. And last but not least, we also provide a scope insights section where it then really drills down into a certain scope. So a scope in that case could be a management group summarizing all the findings, but also drill down then to all the subscriptions that are linked to that management scope or even are linked some stages lower. Great. So this is just a rough summary of what the tool will give you. However, we want to speak about the Azure Landing Zones integration. So let's take a look at the demo. The demo link should be provided. I think some colleague will paste it here into the chat, and it will also be available from the Azure Governance repository itself, which you can find by navigating to aka.ms/azgovris. And from here, you can then also go to the demo section. It's one of the links at the very early start. And then you can also jump into this. So as just introduced, that would be here our hierarchy map that it creates for us in an HTML format. Then we have the tenant summary, meaning really summarizing everything that we found for the whole tenant. The definition insights, this is now exported to a dedicated HTML file because it can become quite large. And last but not least, we have the scope insights. Good. Let's make us some space so that I can show you the features. So in the tenant summary under policy, we have the Azure Landing Zones policy version checker. And in case you have deployed ALZ or even are just only leveraging from the ALZ policies, it would, when it has queried your tenant, then collect all those policies that it found and compare to the latest release from the Azure Landing Zones repository, and then give you kind of analysis what it has found in your tenant. So let's expand that to at least show us a bit. So you can see in my tenant, I have some potentially outdated policies. I have ALZ policies that are already obsolete, meaning they have been deprecated. I have some of my policies are actually up to date, and some are definitely outdated. Now I don't find an example, but some of those are already also outdated. What we are doing here is we are comparing the policies by first taking the policy rule hash, comparing that. We take the policy name and compare it, and last but not least, we are taking the newly introduced metadata tags that come with the new ALZ, not only the new, but that come with ALZ policy definitions. So we have under the metadata, we have tags like the source, the category, and a tattoo that says, hey, I'm truly an ALZ policy. And based on that report, you can then find out what you are maybe missing in your tenant, or what you should go and update. And again, this then, of course, will, well, here the circle closes. It would lead you back to AZ Advertiser, where you could then have a deeper insight on the policy that you've just checked for. And that concludes my session. Thanks for the attention. Thanks for the time. Handing back to you.
Awesome, thanks, Julian. Awesome tooling. So yeah, and with that, I think we're on to another very highly anticipated topic for this afternoon, which is subscription vending or landing zone vending. So Matt, do you want me to share the slides, or do you want to kick them off?
If you could, please, mate. Yeah, I'll then take over from when you've.
Yeah, 2 seconds.
So let me just begin while Jack's getting that ready. That it's really exciting to be able to share what we've been working on for the past year or so, I guess. This is a topic that we've been thinking about for a long time. When we created ALZ, so I should introduce myself first, sorry. So my name's Matt White. I'm part of the core ALZ team, working with Jack and the other people and Jeff and Paul and stuff. So I do most of my work for ALZ in the Terraform space, but yeah, kind of get involved all up. Now, back to subscription vending. We have known about this gap, I guess you'd call it, in our offerings for a long time, and we've spent a lot of time talking to customers, trying to understand what they want from subscription vending, because we know we've advocated subscription democratization, right? We've done that from the beginning. So what we haven't done a good job of is telling you how to do it. So we said, yeah, you should adopt subscriptions as a unit of scale and do all that, but there hasn't really been any automation or tooling available to customers to help them achieve that. So yeah, it's really exciting to be able to share this stuff with the wider community, and we really want your feedback. So just checking, I've taken over, just checking the slides are coming through.
Yeah, all good.
Cool, thank you. So ultimately, what the subscription vending infrastructure as code solutions are Bicep and Terraform implementations, modules, which will orchestrate the creation of the subscription. They will then optionally put the subscription in a management group. They will configure virtual networking, so including scenarios like hub and spoke, vWAN connection, custom DNS servers, links to DDoS plans, all that kind of stuff. We will also do role assignments at the subscription level or lower, and we'll put some resource locks on the resource groups that we create if you want. So if you put your virtual network in there, you create your peering back to your hub, we'll put a resource lock on that resource group. So this is an intentionally limited set of features that we're releasing in our kind of initial output, because these were the most asked for features in the customers we spoke to. And what's really nice about this is you can use it with ALZ, right? It dovetails really, really nicely into ALZ, but even if you're not using ALZ, you can also use this. So it's completely modular. And let me just skip on a slide. It kind of fits into this landing zone model that we have in ALZ, where the ALZ provides the platform, and then you have these different types of landing zones. So we've got a centrally managed landing zone. Now that could be your connectivity subscription with your hub and spoke and stuff in it, with your hub, sorry, not your spokes. Or could be your management central subscription or something like that. Now, typically, this is not a use case for subscription vending because this is created as part of your bootstrapping exercise for ALZ. We also have our workload landing zones. So these would be a great use case for landing zone vending because you get a team come to you and say, hey, we want to deploy this workload in Azure. You can use landing zone vending to help orchestrate and automate the subscription, the vending of the subscription. Sorry, I've just lost control of the slides. I'm just going to change that. Should be looking at slide 23. We also have the tech platform landing zones, which are a great use case for subscription vending as well, because these are often shared expensive resources like APIM, something like that, API management, which is used by multiple teams, but you still need to automate and orchestrate the provisioning of that subscription, the network peerings, and all this other stuff that comes part of it. So if we move on, so the positioning really is, yeah, we've got some core offerings around ALZ. We're good at that automation. People like the portal experience. Generally, they like the Terraform modules and the Bicep modules, and of course there are issues that are raised, but in general, we've got really great feedback about all this stuff. But there's a gap. Like, how do we create those landing zones? How do we do it? If you're wondering, okay, well, I'm not really sure how many subscriptions I need. Well, luckily, we've done a video on that. So part of the CAE YouTube channel that Jack mentioned before, you'll see Jack, Kevin, and myself talking about subscription democratization in general in ALZ and positioning. Actually, how many subscriptions do I need? What's my decision point for creating a new subscription? If we go on to, yeah, good, thank you. I'm just qualifying that the slide is working. If we go on to the example customer journey now, this helps position subscription vending within the wider ecosystem in ALZ. So as part of the bootstrapping exercise, you will create your initial platform subscriptions. Now that will be typically your connectivity, your management, that kind of stuff. Then you'll create the platform. That will be using the ALZ accelerator, so the portal, the Bicep or the Terraform modules that we have. You can very quickly bootstrap your platform environment, create your core networking, your management, your policy, all of that stuff. What we then have is the subscription vending modules, which allow us to, at scale, create multiple subscriptions and dish them out to application teams, whereby once the application teams are receiving them, they can optionally use our workload accelerators like AKS, like Kubernetes, AVD, whatever they want to deploy the workload. So we have a complete journey from platform creation all the way through to workload deployment. All of this is modular. You can just use the workload accelerators if you want on its own. You can just use subscription vending on its own if you want. And you can just use the ALZ, right, at the moment, but they work really well together. So what we really want you to do is come back to us with your feedback and yeah, to start using it, basically. Here's a kind of closer up graphic, and this is the kind of, we're actually writing the documents at the moment. So this is one of the graphics that we're trying to get into the CAF docs. So expect in the next month or so, maybe 2 months, that the CAF docs will be going live. So this will be part of the CAF docs experience. We're also going to have stuff in the Azure Architecture Center for you to review. And the code is already out there. People are using this. We've had some great feedback so far. I just saw in the chat some people are asking about AAD group creation, and absolutely. So in Terraform, there's an Azure Active Directory provider. So we can create, as when you provision your landing zone, we can create some Active Directory groups and then assign them to that subscription. Now that's a feature request at the moment, but it's completely possible. So we need your feedback in order to help prioritize them yes, so put our efforts into the right place. But yeah, really excited to share that with you. And yeah, it's been a long time coming. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, like, do go check them out. As Matt said, let us know. Apologies for the slides there. Seems like we're having some cross-platform issues, Macs and Windows. So yeah, go check them out. But we'll make sure the slides get shared and the recording hopefully has the right ones. If not, I'll be editing them. So then we'll make sure you see the right things regardless. So if I take back control and let's see what slide we all end up on now. Hopefully you can all see the contributing to the ALZ repo update slide. Just a quick thumbs up if people can see that slide. Fantastic. All right, and with that, I'd like to introduce and hand over to another one of our colleagues, James.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jack. So my name's James. I'm part of the ALZ core team as well, so contributing and helping maintain ALZ all up, including Bicep and the rest of the solution area. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the contribution guide and what updates we've done on that. So I'm going to take over sharing, hopefully successfully. Tell me if you can see my screen. You should be able to see the guide.
We
Okay,
can.
good stuff. So inside of the wiki, we will see that there is a contributing side of things. So we have guidance on how to be able to contribute to Azure landing zones, so and including all the different reference implementations, including the portal experience, Bicep modules, and the Terraform module. So the way that we kind of manage the contributions is done through kind of a committee of maintainers. So they could be issues, they could be feature requests, or even just general encouraging you to be able to work on the solution area themselves as well, being able to create your own pull requests and work with the solution. So talking about how we can kind of contribute, we look into kind of reporting bugs and how we can kind of bring that to the team if you find something, raising those issues and also letting the right teams know, and maybe even going in as far as building out a solution for the bug and getting the PR in. We go into feature requests as well. So if you think that there could be an additional feature which could be added into Azure landing zones in any of the reference implementation areas that go against the design principles, just feel free to put a feature request in and get your voice heard. And we really do encourage the community to get involved with this side of things. We got the security vulnerability as well. So talking about the policies and also a policy section. I won't go through that now. I'll just drop a link into the contribution guide into the chat. And then also speaking about the policies and how to kind of easily work with those, we've got a bit of a step-by-step guidance into those custom policies. So including a location folder as well. We've got the naming convention, a little bit of guidance around what append, audit, deny, deploy, they all do. And then we got a bit of a breakdown into the metadata. So the versioning, the category, the source, and what type of cloud environment you're putting the definition into and where it is appropriate. So we can see here that the examples given are Azure Cloud, China Cloud, and Azure US Government. And then just a table of contents around the metadata. We talk about how to create the necessary items in the policies.bicep file inside of the source and templates folder. And then we just kind of go on into the actual PR side of pieces. So we can see here the screenshot is given from a forked repository with some changes going into the main branch there with enterprise scale. We talk about policy deprecation and also the versioning inside there as well in this guide. So I really do kind of encourage you as a community to get involved with this and begin creating your own policies, even maybe start doing some amendments and just really kind of get your hands dirty with the solution area and getting those PRs submitted. So with that, thank you for your time. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll hand it back.
Thanks, James. And yeah, like great work. And we've really invested quite a bit into our contribution guidance. So please do go check that out and feel free to submit as many PRs as you like, make our lives busy. And with that, I'm handing over now to our awesome friends in the Carmel team. Alexander, do you want me to share the slides or do you want to share from there?
No, please go ahead. Thank you.
Cool.
I will then just take control after you share.
Yeah, worries. Let's go back to where we were. Hang on. All right, can we all see slide 31? I think we need to go to.
Second, let me just jump over here. Hopefully this worked. I'll be on slide 31 now. Okay, cool. So yeah, thank you very much, Jack. So yeah, my name is Alexander Seer. I'm a consultant at Microsoft actually, and also been working with the enterprise scale team for quite a while. I have a very short time frame now to give you a high-level pitch about an initiative we've been running at Microsoft, especially ISD and the CSU for quite some time now, over a year, which is called the Common Azure Resource Modules Library, short CAML. So first things first, the link to that open source repository is on the bottom here. It's aka.ms/camel. And the repository essentially consists of two main parts. So the first is, let's see if the animation works. Yeah. The first is essentially a library, as the name already suggests, of reusable bicep-based building blocks. So what does that mean? Well, the repository has a folder called modules, and essentially in there we have deployment modules based on bicep, which are aligned with the Azure Resource Reference to deploy a bunch of different services like storage account, keyboards, analysis services, and so on and so forth, totaling about 120 modules now. But we also enable the deployment of child resources, like, for example, containers for storage accounts, which brings the number of total modules we have in that library up to 260 right now. And the idea here is that these modules are not just the default bicep deployment, but essentially we try to add capabilities on top of that, be it better defaults than, for example, in the portal, but also then the deployment of really additional capabilities like RBAC, like diagnostic settings, private endpoints, and so on and so forth. But I'm going to get to that in a bit so that we take a look at one module as an example. The second part of Carmel is actually a CI environment. So when we set up the modules and worked on those, and it's actually a common task I'm also faced with when delivering at customers, we obviously wanted to make sure those modules are also tested. And we built a framework up for that, which runs both PESTA, static PESTA tests for, let's say, security tests, best practices, and so on and so forth, but also then deployment tests so that we try to deploy the module from different angles to really make sure the configurations work as they are supposed to be generic by default. So we really want to cover as much ground as possible. The special thing about the CI environment, or why I explicitly call it out here, is, however, that the CI environment was actually created with the intent that you can use it as a consumer and adopt it yourself, be it for the Karma modules, but also to create, for example, your own solutions. So it is implemented completely for GitHub as well as Azure DevOps. It works for ARM as well as Bicep, and it really just takes a few simple steps to get it running. And aside from just testing, for example, it provides you also with capabilities for documentation, for publishing Bicep code to, let's say, to template specs, to the private Bicep registry, or even Azure DevOps Universal packages, depending on your needs. So what's the value proposition here fundamentally? Well, the first thing to point out maybe is that the library in itself is supposed to be a good reference naturally, but you can also adopt the entire library yourself to use them directly in your solution creations and ideally make it a lot easier to deploy certain solutions. For example, customer managed key deployments are often vastly different depending on what resource provider you actually work with, and we kind of try to align those a little bit by providing a consistent interface in those modules. And further, you can use those modules independent, by the way, of the CI environment, and the CI environment independently of the modules. The second thing is that it's supposed to accelerate the solution creation because you have a bunch of examples on how to do sometimes quite complicated things. As reference, if you don't want to use the modules, but just implement it yourself, you can use the modules themselves. And of course, you can also adopt the CI environment for your own solution creation if you want, so that you don't have to start from scratch. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So what is actually a module? Ideally, we should be on slide 33 right now, by the way. So fundamentally, like I said before, we are aligning with the resource providers. So we have, for example, a module for storage account. Now, the storage account module can not only deploy a single storage account with some ideally secure and smart defaults, but it can also deploy all its children via one interface. So you can say, I want to have a storage account, like in variant 1 or variant 2 with 2 different properties, but maybe I want to deploy a storage account with file share or 2 file shares and a table, or with logs, or I want to deploy a storage account with 1 file share, but I want to have RBAC set up on that. So you can all basically do this via the one interface, which is supposed to make it really easy. And for example, case in point for RBAC, you don't even need to know the role definition ID. You can just use the contributor name, and essentially the module will automatically the role definition ID for you and apply that, which is, I personally think it's quite nice because it's a lot easier to read a name than a GUID. So a module fundamentally deploys one service, like a storage account, for example, and its children, which are considered strongly correlated services, so they belong together. But they also can deploy other resources if it makes sense. For example, a firewall makes probably sense to deploy with a public IP. Similar to a virtual machine, makes sense to have maybe a NIC deployment for that, right? And the same is true for private endpoints, managed identities, and so on and so forth. So on the right side, you can see a high-level overview of where you could kind of like position Carmel in your mind, I guess. So on the bottom, we have ARM essentially like as the fundamental deployment DSL to deploy to Azure. Now, Bicep is built on top of ARM, right? So you can convert a Bicep template anytime to an ARM template, but it brings you a lot of additional capabilities. And fundamentally, personally, I think it's kind of like TypeScript for JavaScript. It's just really nice to use in comparison. Now, Carmel is using Bicep. So it's kind of like built on top of Bicep, but we are not trying to abstract everything away. But ideally, you use Bicep in combination with Carmel or Carmel in combination with Bicep, just to make a lot of deployments easier for you and use the combination to then deploy solutions. Like, for example, on top here, we have the AKS Landing Zone Accelerator, same for ABD and other solutions. And that already is the end pretty much. Just one last word. It's an open source community, so feel free to check out the website and contribute if you want to. There's a lot of good content there, and yeah, I hope to hear from you. So back to you, Jack. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alexander, and yeah, great work on the Carmel team. And if any of you go looking in the Bicep landing zone vending module, you'll find a lot of Carmel code has helped build that. Admittedly, it's version 0.6, but we need to update. But you know, we have used Carmel to construct that module as well. So if you use the Bicep landing zone vending, you're going to use Carmel as well. So go and have a look at that. All right, we are running out of time, but this is we've got a very special guest from the product group. So I'm going to hand over to Lewis. And he's going to take you through some new stuff coming in the world of RBAC. So, Lewis, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jack. Hey, everybody. I'm Luis. I'm a product manager on Azure RBAC. Today, I'm going to be talking about a feature that right now we have on private preview. We call it internally constrained delegation. And hopefully, we're looking for ways on how to integrate this with Azure Landing Zone. So when I go through the presentation, I'm gonna try to be quick given the time. If you can think about scenarios where you wanna see this in Landing Zone, please feel free to share it, you know, like that we can consider those. So what is the problem that we're trying to address here? So let's think about Dada and Joe. Dada and Joe. Dada is a contributor in the subscription. Joe is a VM contributor in the subscription. Dada wants to authenticate with Azure Container Registry from an Azure Kubernetes services, and Joe wants to create and access virtual machines using Azure AD and Azure RBAC. So Dada, since she's a contributor on the subscription, she can create a Kubernetes service, she can create the Azure Container Registry, no problem. But then when she's trying to connect the AKS managed identity with the ACR to be able to pull images, she's not able to do it because she doesn't have the owner or user access administrator privilege to create that role assignment for the managed identity. Now let's look at Joe. When he is able to create virtual machines, great, but when he's trying to access the virtual machine using Azure AD identities and Azure RBAC, he's not able to do it because he needs to be a VM admin login and VM user login, but he's not able to create those role assignments because he is a VM contributor. Now, what are the options they have? They need to ask Alice, who is the owner of the subscription, hey, can you assign this managed identity, the ACR pool role? Or Joe, hey, can you make me owner or can you make me user access administrator? So Alice say like, no, those are too powerful roles. Like I'm not gonna give Joe the user access administrator role to create role assignments for everything in the subscription. And Dara and Joe, there are other developers, other architects that will be in the same scenario. So what are we trying to address here? Here are the scenarios, right? Like as a subscription owner, so as Alice, I want to allow a security principal, like a group, a user, or a service principal to be able to assign a limit set of roles, the roles that they need to be able to complete their scenario end to end, right? And as a DevOps, so as Data, I need to access my resource and grant data plane access to the resource I create, right? I want to manage that, or I want to manage the resource group access. So what's in private preview right now? It's that I can limit the number of roles that someone can assign. And that's what I'm going to demo now. So what you're going to see is that Alice and like the subscription owner, it's able to assign and delegate data, the ability to create role assignments only for certain roles. In this case, you see contributor and reader role, right? And then you can see here that she can only assign role assignments, create role assignments for contributor, but you can go further than that, and you can say that only for this group, for example, right? Like, or only for principals type service principals. So this is what I'm gonna demo. So now let me share my screen.
Yeah, we've got you.
Yeah, okay, great. So in here, you see in this demo, what I'm gonna do, it's that, oops, back. It's that I'm gonna assign, I'm gonna allow the developer, right? In this demo is Sylvia, her name, to be able to assign ACR pool roles only to service principals. That's what I wanna do, because that's the only thing she needs to do. So what I'm gonna do is I go to the Azure portal, and then this is the short link for the private preview. I'm creating a role assignment. I select a new role that we have created. It's the role-based access control administrator role. And why we created a new role? This role has only permissions to manage role assignments, which is different to the user access administrator role that has permissions to manage role assignments, plus policies, plus other things, right? This role has only permission to create role assignments. The good news is that you can also use any custom role that has permissions to create role assignments. So in general, any custom role that has permissions to create role assignments will have the experience that I'm going to show you. So I select the role. Now we select who is going to be. Sylvia is our developer. So great, we select Sylvia. Now we're going to add a condition to that role assignment, right? We're going to say, Sylvia, every time you're going to use the permission to create role assignments, you're going to be constrained. And the constraint is going to be based on the roles that you're going to assign. So I say role IDs equals to, and then I select the only roles that I want her to assign, ACR pull and CR push. And then, okay, great. And it's also going to be constrained by the principal type that you are going to assign those roles. So in this case, the principal type is going to be service principal. So let's go here. Equal to service principal, great. And then here's how I create the role assignment. It's successful. Now let's look at Sylvia's perspective. Okay. So now I'm looking at Sylvia. You can see here, Sylvia. I don't know if you see my mouse, yeah, you see my mouse, yeah, because I'm sharing. So we're looking at Sylvia right here, right? And then I'm gonna ask Sylvia, I'm gonna create a role assignment, right? So I select the role, I select the ACR pool, right? I select the member, I select a user, and then I'm gonna assign the role, which is suspected that it's gonna fail because the conditions say that Sylvia can only assign it to service principals. So it fails as suspected, great. Now Sylvia say, okay, I'm just gonna try it again because that's not what I needed to do. Then ACR pool again, I select a managed identity this time. Great. Select the managed identity. I'm just gonna create the role assignment now, and now it's successful. Great. So that's the demo. Jack, can we get the presentation up again?
Talking away on mute. I'll certainly do that. Whilst I'm doing that, there's been a great question in the chat that I'm sure you were expecting.
Okay.
But when is constrained delegation going to be GA?
Yeah, so we are working very hard to make it to public preview. And nice, we have a nice sunrise here in Seattle today. So I'm just gonna close the windows. We are working very hard to make it public preview by like late March. That's our goal. So I'll keep in touch. Like anyone who needs to know if that things change can reach out to me, but that's our goal right now. You know, in the cloud now, like timelines are not fixed, but that's what we are going for.
All right. Well, hopefully the slides are all there, and we should be on slide 41. So feel free to carry on.
Exactly. No, and the last thing I want to mention is that this is just the beginning. What I show you, we know this feature has way more potential. So as you can think of like, hey Jack, I would love to see this in landing zone. Jack, like his team, me, my team, we're gonna be working together on how to make that connection. So please share that feedback. And another thing that's coming along with what I show you, this is not yet available, but it will be, is that I show you conditions on role definition, on role assignments. Now, what if we can enable Alice to assign data? Like right now with the VM contributor, you notice like she's only able to create role VMs, like virtual machines, but she's not able to access using Azure Airbag. What if we allow to create role definitions that has those conditions, right? So we create, for example, a VM data access administrator that in the definition of that role, you can create role assignments, but only for specific roles, right? So that way, Alice can say, data, you are good to go to create virtual machines and manage access to these virtual machines. So I'm going to give you these 2 roles, right? And that way, you can, as Alice, you can have separation of concerns. So if there are scenarios where you don't want data to be able to manage access, you only want her to create VMs, then you assign the VM contributor. If you want her to manage access to that resource, then you assign a VM data access administrator. So this is what we're working on. This is hopefully going to be bundled with the public preview that we're going to have in late March. So that's my presentation. Jack and team, thanks for inviting me. It's been a great opportunity to show you all this. And if you want to learn more, or if you want to try it out, please fill out this form that I'm pulling up right now. Just give me 1 second. Sign up. Well, I'm going to share the link on the chat on how you can sign up for the private preview if you want to try it out before we go public preview.
Yeah,
Sounds
I think
good.
from the chat, Lewis, that's been awesome, and people are very excited for this much needed and waited for features. So yeah, we'll look forward to getting more people on the private preview, and obviously it'll be in public preview hopefully very soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks again. And obviously, if you do have any ideas, like Lewis was saying at the beginning, for how ALZ could do this, feel free to ping them in GitHub issues to us. We'll make sure that they get to Lewis. We're going to be syncing more regularly. So get your feedback wherever, and we will make sure it gets to the right place. All right, so I'm going to go very quickly because I know we are well over time, as expected, with a packed agenda. So we're going to skip Q&A, which I really don't want to do. But if people do have questions, I feel like we've answered a lot in the chat. Please raise GitHub issues or carry on in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. But I feel like everything's been answered. The next one will be in April. Date to be confirmed, but we're going to host this in a more Asia Pacific friendly time zone. So we're going to push this one probably earlier, so earlier for those of us who are in Europe, so that those people can benefit from that. And obviously, again, it will be recorded, so our friends and colleagues in the US, you can catch up at a later date on the recording. So stay tuned to that issue. I will pop a link to that issue in the chat if you can't click on it. And we will announce a date and change the sign up links all for that, because at the moment they point to this call. So they will be there very soon. And as we've shared, the recordings will be available on the wiki at the link here, and also on the YouTube link to the channel that I've been sharing earlier in the chat as well. It will just take you to the same place. So last of all, thank you to everybody who's presented. It takes an absolute army to put these things together. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for, most importantly, for you guys for turning up and showing interest, and keep the feedback coming. We'd really love to hear it.